Yes, indeed. Welcome to the Bladtcast. Very excited to be discussing Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. And joining me are two of the most honorable thieves that I know. Katie Hampton, thank
Hello.
you for being back here on the show.
Thanks for having me. I
Uh,
freaking love this movie.
Absolutely. And our friend Caitlin, who we hope is able to join us today, I ran into her. I was about to see another movie, and this was the opening night. She was seeing it for the third time. So we'll find out about that if she's with us today. And making his first appearance on the Bladtcast, a family member, my brother in law, Richard Quiner. Richard, thank you so
Hello.
much for
Thanks for
being
having
here.
me.
And
I
in an
feel the same
interest,
way about the movie. Just I'm excited to talk about it.
Yes, and in an interesting turn of fate, Richard is actually joining us from the house I used to live in. He and his wife, my sister-in-law, are renting the townhouse we used to live in, and we've got our big messy house with boxes everywhere. But I wanted to start off. We were talking a little before we got going, and I want to get some background from each of you as it relates to Dungeons and Dragons. And let's go within the chat first, though. Our pal Dominicus Saxon. I've been playing D&D since 1979, and this movie rolled a natural 20. Richard, does that joke stand up?
I it stands up. I would agree with
Okay.
that too.
It's one of those like we'll allow it. All
Definitely.
right. I just had to check with the judges to make sure because it seemed funny to me. And yeah, my brother played D&D a lot for a few years. And I played a little bit, but I was more into the what was the company? TSR? Was that the name of the company?
Sorry, that was
That's
the
yeah.
original
They also
publisher.
had the license for the Marvel superheroes role playing game. So I would push my brother to play that more often because that was in my personal wheelhouse. And, but my familiarity was mostly with the animated series, which we will talk about during the course of this conversation. Katie, take a moment and talk a little bit about basically retell the story you told us right before we started. But I think it's a funny way to kind of talk about sort of some renewed interest as it related to D&D for some people in recent years.
Absolutely. Well, I had a bunch of friends that would play like on the weekends and whatnot. And the first time I played was at a friend's house who actually is not far from me at the moment. But he would start the sessions at like 10 at night on a weekday. And I didn't realize how long these went.
Yeah.
And I was like, guys, I got work in the morning and like early in the morning. I was like, I don't think I could do this. So I think whatever character I made, and I made a very in-depth, pretty character. It was like, I think that might need to die off because I can't keep this up. But then after that, one of my friends, this was pre-pandemic, we started playing via Zoom. I guess it was like, I don't know if it was Zoom or not. I don't know what the like best programs were before all of that, but we started playing because they live in Missouri, and that's when I really got into it. And I had a brawler character that was half Dragonborn. This was 5th edition, I believe, and sounded like Mr. T.
Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, if only there were more characters in any fandom and any variety and any platform that sounded more like Mr. T. I think that's a great way to go. Craig Robinson joining us from across the pond. Never played D&D, but had good fun with the movie. And yeah, we'll get into the movie itself. But I think it's easy to make the mistake where a movie like this might be inaccessible to people who didn't play, but I think that they did a good job of that. So, Richard, as one of the people who I immediately thought of that I wanted to talk to about this movie because of your background, take a moment and explain to people just how into D&D you are.
Well, I mean the handle on the screen here is the RPG Daily. So I do have a YouTube channel where I talk D&D that I've been running for a couple of years now. I've been playing 5th edition is the current edition of the game. I've been playing that since I want to say 2016. So quite a while. And then in 2018, I started being the DM. And the problem with Dungeons and Dragons in general is once you become a DM, you never stop. So that's all I do now. I run 2 games every week, and then I have another game that I run twice a month. So I'm just playing a lot of D&D and talking D&D and just living in, and I 3D print miniatures for D&D. Like, it's kind of all encompassing at this point.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
It's a
and
bit much.
obviously D&D completely separate fandom, but you and your lovely wife Brittany had a Lord of the Rings theme running through your wedding, and
Yes.
if I was smart, I would have grabbed a couple pictures of my kids the way they were dressed up. Maybe I'll be able to pop those in as we go along. But yeah, and you actually you need a lot of space for 3D printing, for licenses, for things that tie into Lord of the Rings and D&D. And
Yeah.
since we're talking about it, where do people find all that stuff if we've piqued the interest of people out there in the audience?
So if
Richard?
people need 3D printed miniatures, my shop is on Etsy. It is called Adventures in 3D. I sell miniatures out of I call it a premium resin. It's a bit more expensive, but it's really hard to break, I found. A lot of resins are really brittle, but mine, I've been throwing them against the wall, and I have no problem with models breaking. So that's Adventures in 3D on Etsy. That's where you can find miniatures and such.
Fantastic. So we discussed it, quickly in passing, but I think you have a great fantasy adventure story, and I think to start with that as the foundation in which the movie's built on, I think sometimes when you're adapting any kind of property, you're like, well, we have to incorporate all these things, all these these tropes of the series, the video game, whatever it might be. And I mean, I think that you can peel the Dungeons and Dragons off the top of this, and it still works as a really fun fantasy movie. And what do you think, Katie? Do you think that that's a wise approach when telling this story, where people know the name Dungeons and Dragons, but not everybody knows exactly what that is? So you don't want to feel lost when you sit in the chair with your big bucket of popcorn, right?
It's very true, and that was the thing. My fiance Mark has never really played D&D. Like, he's heard of it, and like obviously it was a huge thing in Stranger Things and such a theme. So I feel like the general knowledge of just its existence is fine enough. Going into that movie, it's just a fun movie. It feels like the first real, and I know it's not summer yet, but it feels like the first real summer blockbuster movie that we've had in a long time. That's just fun and not from the Marvel universe where people are dying all the time. Like, it was just like, it was pure jokes. It was great script writing, like all the structures. Also, the two guys that directed it, they're wonderful. And if you haven't checked out some of their other movies like Game Night or something like that, like, please go check them out. They are wonderful directors. They did so much with the script that I feel like it's very accessible to all parties, even if you're not super into fantasy, and but like, this is a very accessible way to watch it.
Right. I think it's important when something gets turned over to someone who has affinity and love for a property, but you don't want to lose people, I mean, giving Jon Favreau Iron Man and then The Mandalorian, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff built into those, but it's like anybody can sit down and, I mean, especially that first Iron Man, you don't, it was the first one. You didn't need to see 23 movies just to try and follow. And
or
I think
TV shows, or like the different like universes. Like, yeah, no, it's wonderfully accessible and very funny.
Our pal Dominicus Saxon, again, Katie's right. It's a movie for everyone. Even Mrs. Saxon wants to see it this weekend. Mrs. Saxon likes to spend her time away from Dominicus Saxon. So the fact that she's willing to sit in a room with you, I tease, I kid, because I love. So, Richard, I want to kind of ask you sort of the reverse of that, because one of the things that I thought when I saw the trailer months ago was, I'm like, I don't know what this is in relation to Dungeons and Dragons, but it looks like a fun movie. Were you at all nervous that it wouldn't be D&D enough?
Before the trailer dropped, I did have some nervousness surrounding that, because in film and TV in recent years, we've had this thing where a lot of times the showrunners on TV shows or directors of big IPs are not fans of the IP that they're making the film of. I believe Halo had this same problem where the director, the showrunner, was not a Halo fan, but here they're making the Halo TV show. which we know was not, in my opinion, was not the greatest. But I was nervous about that originally, and then the trailer dropped, and all that nervousness just went away as soon as the trailer hit the internet, because it was 100% D&D from the get-go in that trailer. And yeah, I didn't have anything to worry about after that.
And I remember before going to it, like so many people were talking about like how they hope there's like sort of metagaming jokes within, and there totally were.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I was laughing with the rope where she was like, well, I have rope in my bag. And I was like, oh my God, I was laughing so hard. And I turned to my fiance, I was like, it's like everybody starts with rope. Everybody's got a rope in their bag. That and a couple of coins. Like, it's such a dumb, like, pass away joke, but it hit me in the heart.
I was like doing a little kind of thinking back when I saw it last week and remembering all the Easter eggs I had seen. So I have like a whole list of, those kind of tropes that come into play in the game, but also are just great fantasy tropes. And right from the get-go, like, they made it something very comfortable for someone who is involved in the game and loves the game. They made it easy for them to get into without feeling like, oh, this is made by someone who doesn't care about it at all. Right from the start, right from Chris Pine's monologue telling his story right at the beginning. It's every player has done that similar background over and over again. So it really hit the mark.
And Nemika Saxon adds, the moment I saw the black dragon in the trailer spitting acid, I knew this movie had been done right. Now, Richard, I know that I believe you went Thursday night, opening night. I know you went the first weekend. You went with some of your D&D pals. So was there anything that was like, oh, I really liked it, but was there any like, this kind of bummed me out that this didn't happen the right way or anything like that? Because, you can always, when you put a movie, you turn the microscope enough, you can find something wrong with pretty much everything. Or were they just able to kind of let it go and just be like, yeah, it was fun?
I think there was just so much happening that none of us had a chance to really dissect it with the microscope. Like, walking out of it, the biggest complaint we had was the theater we were seated in didn't let us take beer in. So like, that was our biggest complaint. Otherwise, we were in it, and afterwards we were all excited and we were hyped, and everyone was talking about when they were going to go watch it again. I'm going this Sunday night. I'm taking my wife to that. So we didn't see anything, but I think it's partially because we did not scrutinize it, because we just had a good time. We were just along for the ride.
And that was one of the greatest things about that movie, is that, like, afterwards I was like, wow, all of their act breaks, all of their structure, like everything, like the rules of the world made sense even to a casual viewer, even if you didn't know like how magic works. I love that the running theme was like, that's not how magic works.
Yeah.
It really like it stuck to its guns with that. Like, I just thought, like, structurally, like, afterwards was just perfect. And all the, like, they had Baldur's Gate referenced in there, but they didn't go there. But like that, like, all that stuff really geeked me out. It was so well done.
Yeah, it really made the world that they're in feel more real and full, just even for the casual viewer, because they just played it so well in writing it.
Yeah. Also in the chat, Roz JD thought that there could have been something to be said for I have a 10-foot pole would have been in the spirit. And then he's getting a little in the weeds, but if they'd had an orange dragon breathing pure sodium, it would be better. And Roz JD, a lot of what you're saying in there, I'm like, I don't even get it. And it's coming so fast and furious. And well, that's the wrong franchise. Let's talk about the movie itself. I mean, you have a phenomenal cast to work with, and it's always hard to just not immediately like Chris Pine, except in Wonder Woman 1984. But the first Wonder Woman, he's great in that. But there isn't really anything in there. But and personally, I mean, there's roles that Hugh Grant plays where you're like, oh yeah, this is exactly him. And I kind of love this iteration of Hugh Grant, this older Hugh Grant. this I don't have time for dumb questions on the red carpet at the Oscars Hugh Grant. You know, this is my favorite Hugh Grant. I mean, well, second to getting caught for with a questionable, you know, with a person of the evening, as they say, you know. And but you know, this is way up there, and I thought that him as an adversary, sort of looming in his goofy way throughout, I thought was great. There were people that you know, people in the movie. So the guy from Bridgerton. Now, Richard, I know that's probably one of the reasons why your wife Brittany can't believe that she hasn't gotten to see this yet, because
the only reason she didn't go. Yeah. The only reason she didn't go is because she had another like movie premiere thing that she had to go to that same night. So yeah, that was the only thing keeping her out.
Yeah, so she missed out on that, but and obviously Michelle Rodriguez. Speaking of all things Fast and Furious, but Justice Smith as Simon, I'm gonna admit I had no idea. I had never seen him in anything that I remember, and Sophia Lillis, it was Doric. It's like. I was just like, all right, I'm going to look this up, and this is going to be Amy Adams' younger sister. And I guess it's not, but you know, and I mean, you know, those are basically our leads. And I'm going out of my way, not trying to say the name of the guy from Bridgerton, because I just looked at it and I'm like, oh yeah, I can't. I don't know how to pronounce that accent.
It's because he has the accent mark. That's it.
Yeah, I know. It's like it intimidates me. But I thought.
Justice Smith, if you he was actually in Detective Pikachu, which is like the first time you may have glimpsed him if you actually watched it.
Which I did not see. I prefer my Pikachu's not solving crimes. You know, no, I'm in a very narrow window of a lack of appreciation for all things Pokemon. Because of, you know, it was like when Pokemon was happening, I was like in college. Yeah. And then, you know, so when it came back, I mean, oh my gosh, I went to Nerd Worlds collide because I went with my wife and her parents and Richard's now wife. We went to the Hollywood Bowl to see the J.J. Abrams Star Trek in concert with an orchestra. It was fantastic. And we had to veer off the path because Brittany was looking for some Pokemon check-in points.
for Pokemon Go. Yeah.
So it was like, well, we're at a Star Trek event. What are we going to complain for doing something too nerdy? You know? So, but that's probably why I didn't recognize him. But let's talk about. I think that the cast gelled particularly well. I mean, obviously the Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez dynamic, they did a great job of instantly like, oh my God, that's not my wife. Well, how would you even think that? And she is
they have like a sibling relationship in a way.
Totally, 100%. Yeah. And yet it's weird because they're like co-parents, you know, but in a very sibling way. We'll talk about that, Katie, how you felt about our leads and the rest of the cast as we went on this adventure with them.
Well, first of all, I've never really been the biggest Chris Pine fan. I just feel like he's a little bit like.
Did you only see Wonder Woman 1984 and Wrinkle in Time? Is that the problem?
No. I've seen him in other things, and I saw him in Star Trek, and I was like, you know, I think he's fine. And also, I think the thing that sticks in my mind is his SNL performance, where it felt like he was auditioning for all the musicals, and like. It just felt like I've always felt like Chris Pine was like try hard Ryan Reynolds, and I mean that with respect because he is very handsome and very good. And this movie completely flipped me on the Chris Pine boat. Like I am here for it. Like he had heart, which like if they had cast Ryan Reynolds in this role, it would have been the snarky Deadpool. Like it would have been funny, sure, but it like he brought the heart that I don't think a lot of properties are bringing right now. And like I actually like even cried in this movie because of him and because of Michelle Rodriguez. And Michelle Rodriguez, I feel like just knocks it out of the park in the exact way that she should, which is just a freaking brawler and like sort of a grunty type of like character, and just slayed me with all the things that she was doing. Apparently, and I saw this in an interview, she had grown out her pit hair for the role.
Wow.
Like it's like over several months, and she was like pointing and like trying to make sure the camera got, and like they had cut out every shot of her pit hair that she had spent so much time. And I love that she just went for it in that way, like, because that's hilarious.
That's a degree of method acting that we don't usually hear, and our pal Dominicus Saxon agrees. I loved how they never became romantic, just longtime adventuring companions.
Yeah.
And Roz JD, was the 10-foot pole joke fake laughed at? Now, first of all, I mean, you've seen enough stuff that I've done. The only fake laughing is at things that I say. It's actually a prerequisite. You can only do shows if you're willing to fake laugh at things that I say a few times. The equipment list, everyone knows you need a rope, but an unprepared player will select perhaps the 10-foot pole. So absolutely. So that was legitimate reaction. Don't you worry.
Yeah.
But Richard, it's sort of the same thing as we go on this adventure with everyone. I mean, Simon, the wizard who, just sometimes you need to believe in yourself. I thought, everybody was great. I thought. What were your thoughts from the performances from the cast?
Everyone, like when they first announced Hugh Grant, I was skeptical of that. I was like, what? I don't know. But
yeah.
Then as soon as he's introduced in the flashback, it's like, oh, he fits perfectly in this role. I could see him being, a villain in any game that anyone plays, but also in this kind of movie, he just fit the role perfectly. Justice Smith was such an interesting character to me to watch because he had such, I don't know how spoilery you get on this.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. So let's say at this point we've kind of danced around spoilers. It's sort of been a light spoiler free, but usually when we do these movie specials, we do always get around to talking about all the spoilers. So if you're still considering seeing Dungeons and Dragons and Honor Among Thieves, of course, if you're considering seeing it and you don't want to have everything spoiled, this would be the time to stop listening. But our main viewer / listener who likes to hear all the spoilers in our movie content is actually Dominicus Saxon, and he's already seen it. But he's the one who's like, I don't care, you guys spoil it, I'll still decide whether or not I want to see it. But yeah, so that's sort of the preambling ramble that we can talk about spoilers, Richard.
All right, perfect. So as I was saying, Justice Smith's character, Simon, is a wild magic sorcerer, which in the game of D&D, they are like chaos incarnate. They cast a spell and then something completely different might happen on accident, and that's just how they're played. And he's coming into this with these big shoes to fill because he has this heritage of his ancestors being great wizards and great sorcerers, and he's just this guy who can make the air smell like fresh cut grass. And he can make, light a little fire on his finger. He can do these like little things consistently, but he's constantly, looking back at his past and his ancestors and trying to fill in those shoes, which comes into play in a huge way with the helmet that they have to search for and get use out of.
He has a lot of role for initiatives.
Oh yeah, definitely. He was so relatable just for the average viewer. I think we can all relate to feeling like we have something to live up to. And that just kind of made that connection really strong for me. Watching him, I was just intrigued the whole time. He was amazing. To me, Chris Pine was Chris Pine.
Sure.
Cranked up to 11. So because I was a fan of him before. So that was just like, okay, this is normal. Same with Michelle Rodriguez and what's her name, Sophia Lillis.
Yeah,
I mean she's been good in like everything I've seen her in so far. So it was no surprise that she just crushed it as Doric. And
let's give a shout out to Chloe Coleman is the name of the actress who plays the young Kira, who I think has some good scenes, and her her dynamic with Michelle Rodriguez's character obviously does tug on those heartstrings that Katie referenced, sort of the realization at the end of the film, the sacrifice that is made. And I thought that Sophina, the super creepy witch character, was great. And that actress is Daisy Head is her name. I'm sorry,
Daisy Head. I was just gonna say that I spent the whole movie being like, is it Kristen Stewart? And I just didn't know that she was in this. Like, I was so confused. Like, I couldn't stop. Like, there were times where I didn't realize what she was saying. So I was like, who is this actress?
Well, yeah,
and I
that
just
was
wanted to
part
look
of the
her up on
problem too,
IMDb.
because she's obviously heavily made up. So that was sort of like I'm trying to place her and figure out who she is and all that. But whatever it was, I think everyone was great. And again, the story was fun, filled with plenty of adventures and lots of laughs. What were you about to say, Katie? I could see you looking to jump in with something.
I feel like lately I've been talking a lot about really great nerdy properties, stunt casting, like big names in things, just because they don't
So
have
you saw the
story.
latest Mandalorian, you said?
I actually have not,
Oh.
but for those very reasons. But there's some stunt casting.
It's like stunt casting 101. That's all I'll say.
No, I know. And I was like, oh yeah, because you have no story. This had a little stunt casting.
Burn!
And this had a little bit of a stunt casting, but like did not realize it at first. But when Bradley Cooper came in, I was like, wait, what? And then was also wonderful. Like,
he was great. And I was like, I didn't know he was in this movie. And then you go like, okay, I know why I didn't know he was in this movie, because he's barely in this movie. And by that, I mean how small he was. He was barely there.
He was literally stunt.
No, it's great. And it had been a moment that I had seen him in something where he wasn't a raccoon. So
exactly.
It was, I thought that that was fun. And I know Katie from, knowing you in real life, but also being your social media friend. I feel like I need to give you a moment to sing the praises of Jonathan.
Oh my God. I cannot stop laughing. Like, the line that stuck with me, and like I have a little bit of ADD where it's just like, if you say one thing, I'll say it again and again in my head. But the woman who just said Jonathan is like permanently stuck in my brain. But Jonathan was such a delight. I do want a one shot of Jonathan and just his whole story. I love the beginning monologue where he just keeps asking where Jonathan is, and I was like, oh, this is a bit we're gonna keep coming back to, and I'm so happy about it, and that they brought that bit back at the very end with Hugh Grant, and then he just slams into the wall. It was just such a beautiful payoff.
It was a great callback, and I thought that the sort of as they're tumbling out of the tower with Jonathan, the guy's like, wait, we were gonna prove I thought that so the scene played out really well, and I think that is obviously the funniest sequence, closely followed by when they're able to ask the questions of the corpses. And the fact of like wasting the questions on the first corpse, and that was a very nice mid-credit scene, the callback to the one that's like, I'm still waiting.
Can someone please ask me a question?
I thought that all of that was funny. What were some of the things that stood out for you, Richard? Obviously, I feel like we're going to get no pushback on Jonathan here. This is a Paramount movie, so that could definitely be a Paramount Plus one-off at some point. But what are you thinking, Richard?
Well, I wanted to build on the Jonathan aspect and point out something that I had noticed while watching it, that from a player perspective, it seemed like there was the hand of a dungeon master in every part of this movie, right from the start, with Jonathan, especially because they have these chancellors and they're in front of this board, right, pleading their case. And it felt like the dungeon master was sitting there being like, this is Chancellor so-and-so, the Dragonborn Chancellor. I don't remember any of their names, the halfling. Right. And then there's an Aarakocra, and they're like, oh, what's their name? Jonathan. Like, just I'll pull it out of nowhere on accident. And then they latch onto that. It's like, that's Jonathan. We're dealing with Jonathan now. So that like felt like the DM, the questions in the graveyard felt like the DM just messing with the players a little bit and being like, yeah, this isn't going to work as well as you had hoped. And every moment, even just the painting, and they have this foolproof plan with the painting and the hither-thither staff, and they get it into the treasure room, and then it just tips over.
Yes.
And it just derails their whole plan. I was just like, yeah, I feel like I would have done that kind of stuff to my players in an instant, just to see how they pivot.
Try and like work around it, yeah.
But for me, my most enjoyable part was the intellect devourers. I started cracking up at those. One, because I recently killed one of my player characters with an intellect devourer not long ago. But then in that part, in the Underdark, Zank is explaining the intellect devourers and how they're attracted to intelligence, and the more intelligent you are, then they'll see you, and then they just walk right by the party. And I was like, that's perfect. And even more, all of the classes that they are not intelligence-based classes. They are classes that don't even need intelligence. So it was just like a perfect moment for me to see that, and it was a hoot and a half.
And I love that Chris Pine had the line that was like, "That's just rude."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that that was there were a lot of those great moments. For me, something that I teased in the intro was when they are in the labyrinth in the big Colosseum, and they encounter a familiar looking group of characters to some of us of a certain age. There's a group of adventurers who are dressed like the characters from the Dungeons and Dragons animated series from the early 80s, which, to be fair, was not a particularly good series, but it got 2 seasons, and I watched it every week, mostly because that was the era. If it was on TV, you would watch it. But it was fun. I mean, it was a fun series when I was a kid. And I don't think I noticed it right away, but when there was the wizard with the big green hat, I was like, okay, that's a really nice, and none of them have any lines. They're just kind of trapped there in that cage. That's the second time we see them where they're trapped in the cage. And you're like, oh no, I hope they survive this. So it's, you gotta keep in mind the multiple iterations of the property. That was one that jumped out at me. But Richard, you mentioned you actually had a list of some of the Easter eggs and things. If there's any that jump out that you'd particularly like to share, I'd love to hear some of those.
It's too many. I'll start with one that I had mentioned earlier. Simon making it smell like fresh cut grass was a nod to Critical Role, which is the biggest, most popular live play Dungeons and Dragons show in existence. One of the characters in I believe it's the current campaign they're running, his character's name is Fresh Cut Grass. And he was named after smells that his creator liked. So that was like a nice throw in there for Simon to make it smell like fresh cut grass and keep bringing it back over and over again. It was just a nice little nod.
Yeah, there were a number of mentions, and his entire show was great. It's very reminiscent of the on the Mandalorian Kamal Nanjiani as a fake Jedi. It was just like, I'm gonna look like all this, but I'm really just doing it for money. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, I did really enjoy that whole scene, and his use of spells throughout was just really, really cleverly done. The Tubby Dragon Timber Show he's actually in lore. He was created in 2nd edition D&D. So he's something that's been around for like 25, 30 years. 1999 was when he was invented. So yeah, like 25 years. So that was also really fun to see, like these really old characters brought into the story and introduced. The prison even that they're at in the very beginning it is something in the game, but the thing that a lot of people didn't realize, it was actually made into the game because the movie was coming out and they needed a prison.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this was like 5 years ago or so, 4 years ago, they published a book called Rime of the Frost Maiden, introduced this prison called Revel's End, and the players can go there. All the chancellors are in the game module. So the Dragonborn, the Halfling, and not Jonathan, though.
Sorry. I was going to say, I was like, what?
Well, you let me know when Jonathan shows up in future editions or, supplements, Yeah, I feel like that's a very important part of IP. It's like it's like Harley Quinn being created for the Batman animated series, and then it's sort of like, wait, this is a great character. We have to do something with it.
Yeah, it's its own thing.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan merch better be all over Comic-Con this July. That's
I
all
sure
I'm
hope
saying.
so. I sure hope there's a bunch of Jonathans walking around, if nothing else.
Oh my gosh, how many
Hasbro-
Jonathans would you get your picture with?
All
Katie?
of them. All of them. I will hunt them down. I'll be your Jonathan one-stop shop. I'll be doing live tweet updates. Jonathan on the corner.
Let me ask a specific question. The helmet that they go on the quest for, that they have to get past the tubby dragon, is that helmet something that has existed in D&D lore? I actually forget the technical name of it. If I was a more competent host, I would have made a note as to what that helmet was called. But it's the helmet in the movie. So
the helmet, it's called the Helm of Disjunction.
Yeah,
in the
that's
film, but it's actually was not in D&D before the film. Since the film came out, they've actually published a bunch of like magic items and characters from the movie as playable things. But the helmet was based on a spell that was in very first edition Dungeons and Dragons called Mordekainen's Disjunction. So it does tie back and relate to the very first edition of the game.
Cool.
And the spell did what the helmet did, which was disrupt others. Yeah, it's it's always like, well, my power is to dampen other powers. So well, what my power is to dampen power dampeners. What do you think about that? So there's always like the spell that disrupts spells, but then you have the spell that disrupts the spell that disrupts spells, and it can go on and on.
Of course.
So you reminded me just how much I enjoyed the tubby dragon, which I suspect I suspect that I don't want to shame anyone who goes to Comic-Con, but I think there might be some tubby dragons also on display. Some people who feel like they've finally found their spirit animal, and it's an animal without much spirit, But what were some other big things? So I'm glad to see that the helmet was in a way a shout out, even if it wasn't like a coveted item from campaigns for decades.
It's still kind of leaning to that. The picture that they kind of cut out of the frame and put the portal behind originally was actually a portrait of a very well-known character named his nickname is Volo. I'm forgetting the whole name. Volothamp, I think is his name. But there's even a book that's been published in 5th edition called Volo's Guide to Monsters, which is apparently supposed to be written by this one character. And he was the portrait that they tore apart to put a portal in. That was one Easter egg.
That's awesome.
The Cult of the Dragon, when the Black Dragon came through and was destroying everything, that was a battle with the Cult of the Dragon, which has also been in the stories of Dungeons and Dragons for decades at this point. So that was another nice nod. Oh man, my list.
What about the Resurrection Stone, or that's a Harry Potter?
Oh, the tablet?
Yeah, the tablet.
I believe they said the tablet was created after the movie. It was not something they had originally done.
Okay.
But of course, the Red Wizards of Thay was something that had been around for a while, and Zaz Tam is the big bad guy who's in the shadows with the little eyes. He is actually a well-known lich from the lore of the stories. So they picked an interesting villain to bring in.
Dominicus Saxon says, I saw a quick shot of rust monsters, which, I did not. I was not eagle-eyed for something that my eyes would not have, have caught. But,
there was a very brief shot when they were taking Holga and Edgin to get their heads chopped off, I think. Mm. And you see these two little creatures are fighting over like a little piece of metal on top of a beam of wood. And they're small little red creatures. Those are rust monsters. They eat metal, cause it to rust.
Okay.
It was a very quick shot, but they were in there, and it was really cool to see those too.
Well, we don't want to give too much of a voice to naysayers, but obviously, as someone who's in that world, are you hearing, the loudest on social media usually represent? I was going to say reprehensible, but that's kind of right. They usually represent a small number. Are there a loud but small minority of true diehard D&D players and fans who are just like, anything that comes out, they're probably going to tell you why it's terrible because they feel like that's their job? And what are things that people are saying to criticize this film in particular?
So I did see a few that's an overstatement. Actually, I only saw one person say that they hated the movie and have actual complaints about it. I did not get into like go read their whole Twitter thread or watch their. They do have a YouTube channel. I did not watch their video on why they hated it. Because I'm like, I like it. I don't want to taint that yet. But they did bring up a valid point that the movie did not credit Gary Gygax or Ed Greenwood, who was the creator of Forgotten Realms, which the whole story takes place in. But they did credit Hasbro. They said, based on a game made by Hasbro. And so there is a small group of people who are saying, they should have credited Gary Gygax and Ed Greenwood. But there are just as many people saying, do they really need to? It's kind of bigger than them at this point.
And look, I think there's obviously for people who subscribe to my channel, how much time I spend talking about material adapted from comic books. And I think what I like, because I'm not one of the creators, when there's the thanks for basically everybody who wrote any of the stories that maybe they pulled from for that. And sometimes those names are very long. I feel like that's appropriate. When somebody makes a movie that is directly adapted from a specific work, like multiple movies on the Dark Phoenix saga, you should definitely credit the two creators somewhere. But I know that means you have to pay them. Someone who I know is not heaping any negative comments on the film is the aforementioned pal, Kait Cornell, who, as I mentioned, I ran into at the theater, and you were seeing it for the third time on the day it was released. So I don't even know how that happened. But Kait, how many have you kept up that pace? Have you seen it 9 times now?
I've seen it 3 times now.
Nice. You've seen it 3 times now. Okay.
Yeah.
And what was your feeling after the first one? Did you do one of those? Like, there's people who tell the story about seeing Star Wars when it came out in 1977. I've heard this story where they just got in the line outside the theater afterwards so they could immediately see it again. Was that you with Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves?
I don't think so, because I got into all the pre-screening, so you can't really just like go to the back because there was only one that day. So right. I did the pre-screen. So I was one of those.
Yeah, our pal in the chat, Dominicus Saxon, he did that. There was like an Amazon pre-screening. What were your? And sorry, because I know that we talked a little bit about this at the beginning. Everybody talked about their background with D&D. Mine being, basically the animated series, and trying to convince my brother to play the Marvel role-playing game instead of the Dungeons and Dragons with me. But talk a moment about your background with it and your expectations for the movie. Yeah.
I got into D&D through my friend Lynn, and she got me in because we listened to Critical Role. So my introduction to Dungeons and Dragons was Critical Role, and seeing how Critical Role has turned into the Legend of Vox Machina, and Mighty Nine is now getting its own series. Seeing how with the everything coincided, where 5e, Critical Role, and Stranger Things all kind of came out at about the same time, and they were all kind of using the same material. And so I think, plus the pandemic, everyone started playing Dungeons and Dragons again, and started the people who played it in college, who were the ones who were, or the people who played it when they were kids, were like, oh, cool, I get to share this with my kids, and now we all have time. And there's like a plethora of pop culture references. And then people are now seeing, with the rise of video gaming, that a lot of the characters and a lot of the tropes and a lot of monsters are from D&D are being put into video games and movies. And so I think that people looked around and were like, oh shit, like there's a lot of D&D around, and there's a lot more than just, oh, we're all sitting around a table being nerds. And and also I was rewatching all of the, like, I watched, what was that movie? I think I watched E.T. or something like that, or like one of the old 80s movies, and they were all playing around the table. And it's like, oh yeah, this was like a thing. So it was cool to see like what the culture was, even though I wasn't a part of that culture, and hating that culture as an adult, and seeing what people turned it into a film and how people did it into a film. I also saw the Jeremy Irons movie when it came out.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
It's funny because I referenced the animated series, but I actually forgot about that.
I totally forgot about that one.
completely forgot. Yeah, it's
I never
like,
forget about Jeremy Irons. I wake up and go to bed thinking about Jeremy Irons.
I love Jeremy Irons, but you know, it's like how I like John Leguizamo, but I don't need to talk about the OG Super Mario Brothers, which I'm seeing tomorrow with my kids. By the way,
I
Oh.
can't wait to see what you
it's
think
a
about
friend
that.
of my son Felix is having his birthday party at the movie theater to see Super Mario Brothers, and I had like my
Fuck.
3rd or 4th birthday party. No, they do however they do it. You know, it's all
Right.
pre-arranged. So I'm doing that. I did that. It wasn't when it was first out, but it was like a re-release for the original Superman. I had a birthday party at the movie theater where I saw the Christopher Reeve Superman, and you know, so I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun.
Yeah.
But anyway, so with sort of all of that. The expectation for the movie was probably such where you were like, okay, I think this is going to deliver. Once you saw the trailer, were you just rightfully excited enough to have seen it 3 times, or were you at all cautious, Kate?
I mean, I think when anyone takes a fantasy nerd thing, I think everyone was cautious. I don't know a single person in the room that was like tempering their excitement. But I knew it wasn't going to be a Rise of Skywalker situation. I was excited because it felt like they understood the purpose of the material, and watching it the first time, for people on the panel who don't know me and people in the chat who don't know me, I'm a screenwriter. So it was nice to, even though it was tropey, they took the tropes and then they changed them. The player characters were allowed to make their own choices, and that was built into the script. And any character that was a non-player character or a DM'd character was treated like a DM'd character. They passed information and they moved along. And the fact that they kind of put into the screenplay the function of Dungeons and Dragons and allowed the characters to be creative in their storytelling without it being like, oh, it's a dice roll. But you could see the dice rolls amidst the, like, you could see the intelligence checks, you could see the stealth checks. They treated the objects the way that they treated the objects. I actually said something to Lynn when we watched it, where what the thing that I would have changed about the film was when Kira is being manipulated by Forge, that Forge, instead of saying that the tablet of reawakening is the tablet of riches, for him to say, oh, the tablet is a myth. So that when he pulls it out at the dock, it means more. And she has a visual like, oh, wait, my dad's actually telling the truth. So it gives her that reason to step forward. And then the real betrayal is the knife. But for her,
yeah, that's definitely certainly, you know, good storytelling decisions there. Let me just jump in for a second. Richard, what Kate is saying in terms of, you know, dice rolls and things, you know, some people can make drinking games out of movies. Can you make rolling game out of this movie and being like, okay, let's see if we roll the correct, you know, I don't know if there's a way to kind of do like player participation, or maybe it's more like a Rocky Horror sort of a situation, because, you know, you can't change what happens on the screen. This isn't the movie Clue with its 3 different endings when it was in theaters. But
Right.
Is there something about the movie where there could be sort of a fun, more interactive thing because of the way that they structured the story to reflect the way that the game works?
I think a drinking game is perfect. You could take a drink every time you see a dice roll happening in the story, and you would get smashed pretty fast because they hit it all the time. There's
except at the theater, the theater where they didn't let you bring your beers in.
Right, they didn't. I'll have words with them another day. But
was it the AMC in Burbank, and you couldn't waltz from MacGuffin's right into the?
No, it was the AMC in City Walk, and they have the rule that you can only take drinks in the upstairs theaters, and we were downstairs.
Oh,
it was dumb.
Oh gosh.
It was really dumb, but either way, definitely saw dice rolls all over on the screen. To piggyback off what Kate said too, though, she mentioned NPCs, they give information and leave. There's only one exception. I firmly believe that Zenk is an NPC who was just there for service purpose, but he was there kind of long, you know, doing those things. Masterfully played by Regé Jean. I'm glad you were the first one to try to say his name. I was just like, you know, that guy from Bridgerton, right?
As a Bridgerton fan, it's Regé Jean Page.
Okay. He was wonderful.
He was great.
I've never seen Bridgerton, but I loved that he was the solve that they couldn't keep for the entirety of the game, essentially. And he got them through the one part that they needed to get through, and then he just straight line walked away.
Walked a straight line.
Which is like
I just read that was him. That was his improv.
Oh,
They just kept the camera running, and they're just like, let's just see what he does. And he just walked right over the thing, and they kept it.
Because after I saw it, I was talking to my wife, who is also a big Bridgerton fan, and she asked, if about him in it, and I'm like, well, he's kind of like the lead for not even a full act, but there's a good 20 minutes where he's a lead in the movie, and then he's gone, and he's not really, he's in more than Bradley Cooper.
But he's not making any choices, and he's not making any decisions. He's just like, here's your history dump, because you need to know this stuff.
Absolutely.
And
and everything he does works perfectly.
Yeah.
What we were going around and highlighting some of our favorite moments. Jonathan was a big hit, especially for Katie, which I knew before we even started doing this show. There have been multiple all caps Jonathan with many exclamation points.
I really, the first time I heard his name, I thought they kept saying Jonathan, which is one of the names of the creators, which they definitely, I think, like just twisted. And I thought it would have been really funny if it was just like, oh, Jonathan's just like running late due to traffic, like as in, like in the real RPG. Like I can't really continue my backstory without Jonathan here. And like, can we please wait for Jonathan to arrive?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
But what were some of the favorite scenes, characters, interactions, things that and maybe it was upon your third viewing, you were like, oh, I really liked this or that happened in the film.
Even though it's not like Doric apparently is like a level 15 druid to shapeshift as many times as she does, but I thought the one shot shapeshift was her escaping the castle was great, because they do not break that cut, and it was really, really great for her to do that. And to kind of when you have a character that can shapeshift, and it's probably the coolest part of being a druid is the wild shape, to really give that precedence for the fans. And even though she shouldn't be able to change into an owl bear, I didn't mind that she could change into an owl bear, because it was the like and the kind of balance of like the drama and the comedy with like, I think you got her, and then she kind of like sits up again and it's like, no. And then I hit her 14 more times.
It was very Hulk with Loki in the first Avenger,
And also there was a lot of like, and speaking of like the Hulk with Loki, like the third viewing, there was a lot of like weird fantasy movie tropes that I saw that I really liked. Like, the Lord of the Rings, when they're like walking, like, and you have that wide shot of them and they're doing the circle shot 14, like over and over again. And they did that a couple times in the beginning.
They did that, I think, at 3 points in the movie. And I think it was per act break. They had that.
They had a whoop.
Yeah, they had the hero shot. Like it's a Michael Bay shot that he developed, like low and up, and they circle around.
Yeah, making the difference between startled and frightened. Yeah, I thought that was funny. I wasn't scared, merely startled. I liked the montage of death. I liked that was like the only montage we got in the movie was the kind of like death, the where did the helmet go montage. And that was really expertly done, and it was really funny. It was a good way to like kind of start piecing stuff together without like making it easy for the characters. So the travel montages could be the travel montages, and I thought that they put information in the story really well.
Yeah, and by the way, just shout out to the owl bear, which we can expect to be on shelves everywhere very soon. And I'm going to buy an owl bear, for the kids, of course. They're going to.
Are you going to get a chonky dragon?
Well, we did talk about how we expect to see some of those out at Comic-Con. So
they're already out. They're already on Amazon.
Oh, beautiful! They got to be plushies, right? Or are they?
Yeah, they're just like giant chunky plushies.
I love it. You just roll it around, and it hungry hippos.
Just to circle back what we were saying earlier, Dominicus Saxon agrees with this idea that it would have been nice to acknowledge the two fathers of the game, Gygax and Greenwood, even though they stopped being associated ages ago. Yeah, I mean, look, every Marvel movie says Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and they didn't even work together in the 70s, so it's like obviously it's very easy to give a nod, and if you do it in the right way, if your motivation is to not have to pay someone, you can still do it where you put their
Put
name
him
in
as
the
a
credits.
character. Put him as a character name. Gygax
That's a
is
great idea.
Super.
It's a
like
fun name,
yeah. It's a
absolutely.
great D&D name.
Well, here's something that I've seen in the arguments discussion about that online. So this is not my original thought, but the mention of Mordekainen and his seal. Mordekainen was Gary Gygax's player character. That's him. So some people are saying that is the nod to Gary Gygax, and other people have theories that Edgin was named after Ed Greenwood. It's just a theory, but that could also be seen as that.
I could see that.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Again, rumors, speculation, no hard facts in this statement.
Sure.
But that's all right. Here at the Bladtcast, we operate solely on rumor and innuendo, and those are my two sources for everything that I've ever reported on this show. Obviously, with a wealth of history for this intellectual property, there are a lot of things that they can do with it going forward. It seems like the film has been what they would consider a success. Richard, what would you like to see next? Would you? I mean, I would be up for another adventure with the same cast of characters. Beyond that, what are some things that either you're hearing or maybe hoping that they might decide to do with future Dungeons and Dragons property?
I haven't heard a lot of rumors around things in the future, except there was some rumor briefly mentioned somewhere about a show that could be coming back that had been on the table and then got put it to the side, and then the movie comes out and is super successful, so who knows what will happen there. I think a sequel could be really fun, because this adventure party definitely felt like a low-level party, minus Doric, who was obviously much higher level than everyone else. So I think them growing as characters, maybe see a little more bard magic from Chris Pine, might be something people want to see. I honestly, though, I would be happy if they were just like, yeah, well, that's our movie. We'll just let it sit there and wait and not, beat this horse until it's dead. Just let it be what it is. I would be perfectly happy with that too.
Yeah, but that's not really the way that
that's
Hollywood
not going to happen.
Oh no, that's not how Hollywood goes.
Obviously, anyone who's attended one of my karaoke birthdays knows that a low-level party is the only kind that I personally like to engage in. Craig Robinson from across the pond laughed at some of the dead guys being asked random questions just to break the spell, like, what's your favorite food? And he changed his answer, which I thought was actually very funny.
Bad at math.
That's yeah.
Which is really great for a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, because that's all you do in Dungeons and Dragons is fucking add and subtract.
Yeah. And Dominicus Saxon wants a sequel, and I'm sure you'll get one.
And that's the thing that's so great, is that you could have a sequel with the original cast, or you could have a sequel with literally anyone else.
That's what I was thinking, because when you have the little subtitle Honor Amongst Thieves, it's like that story feels complete, and you can go to an entirely different part of the world, bring in some of those old characters, but have an entirely different party.
Yeah, including Jonathan.
Jonathan would just be through everything.
Katie,
Jonathan.
That's true.
Are you just gonna be on the petition side of Jonathan should get a campaign after how shitty he was treated in the first one?
I mean, Jonathan can be the R2D2 and C3PO of the Dungeons and Dragons film universe. He's in every movie, whether it makes sense for him to be there or not. They
probably spend so much money on that costume.
That's true. They're like, we got to get some money out of this thing. Absolutely. So yeah, I think it was fun, and it was like you were saying at the beginning, Katie. It was exactly what I wanted. There's so many movies coming out because of the backlog due to COVID and just the size, the scope, and the cost of movies. The summer movie season really did begin at the end of March, didn't it?
It really
did. And we're not even into it. And I think tomorrow I'm going to see my 6th movie in the last 2 weeks,
Yeah.
And most of them have been at the very least entertaining. And I think that this was a good one for the large bucket of popcorn, of course. And this is a great thought from Dominica Saxon. I'd love a series done like the Marvel TV series with other characters. As long as one of your characters is Jonathan, you'll hear no complaints from us. And yeah, I think that, that's one of the ways to figure out how to do it. It's like, I mean, there's what Peacock is going to have a non John Wick series, but the John Wick universe, there's going to
non-Wick
be
series.
a non-wick, exactly, a dampened wick, as it were, a sticky wicket. And so, I think that, except for Sony, every studio has a streaming platform. And so there are so many opportunities to spin off, but not like, oh yeah, we're going to spend $1 billion on a film sequel. It's like, oh no, we'll spend, a couple million on a bunch of episodes of content. So yeah, I think that the recognition for the brand, the reception to the movie, we are certainly going to see a lot more. And so, Richard, you've seen it the one time, and you're going to take your wife Brittany over the weekend.
Yes.
You feel like this is one of those multiple viewings, maybe even like, put it on in the background because of just sort of the comforting to go on the journey. You feel like it's a film designed to be rewatched. That's my question.
Oh yeah, I definitely think this is something. Not just because it is a fun movie, it's something I will. Once it's out on Blu-ray or something, I will have it on a lot more often. But even more, they say there's a lot of stuff happening in the background in every scene. So I'm going in this next one being like, what else can I see that I missed the first time? What is this potential story of Tabaxis going on that I didn't catch the first viewing? So it's definitely made for rewatchability and finding more and more of what they had snuck in there for the fans.
And Kait, have you tapped out at 3 viewings, or might you sneak out for a 4th one?
No, why would I tap out? Tapping out is for losers.
Anyway, I know, just because there's so many other movies out. I don't know. You might be like, oh, I just don't have the time. But yeah, it seems like a fun ride. And Katie, you might not be able to squeeze a movie theater visit into your schedule because you're just weeks away from getting married. But obviously Jonathan has received a last minute invite, and I do hope he accepts. And
is he there officiating?
Oh yeah. No, we're expecting him at any minute to show up.
Yeah. That will of course be great. And I think this seemed like a fun one to just kind of spend some time chatting, and it was a perfect excuse to gather together some of my favorite people. And Richard, you made your first appearance on the Bladtcast, and that means that now we've proven that the technology works. We can talk from different corners of Burbank, and
a couple
now
miles away.
And Kait wasn't around when we pointed this out, but Richard and his wife live in my old house, my townhouse, which you've been to, Kait. So,
oh my God, really?
So he's doing it from that location. Yeah. So
broadcasting from the former
not
kids'
in
room.
the closet.
No, that's the kids' room. It was a little bit brighter. And yes, Roz JD with the shout out from Laughing, beautiful downtown Burbank. And I'm a little closer to beautiful downtown Burbank, but we appreciate everybody joining us. And a great question from Craig Robinson: is there a Bladtcast Entertainment Network welcome pack? It was the 6-pack of longboard that I left in the fridge when we moved out. That's the Bladtcast Entertainment Network welcome pack.
Nice.
But Richard, I know we mentioned at the beginning, but let everybody know where they can find you and your Etsy store and all the great things that you're doing for the world of fantasy, as it were.
Yeah, if you want to learn more about Dungeons and Dragons, I have a YouTube channel called The RPG Daily. I'm on Instagram at The RPG Daily. Twitter here and there at The RPG Daily. And if you want miniatures for your D&D games, I sell those on Etsy. The shop name is Adventures in 3D. And I got pretty good reviews. So I think I'm doing all right.
Yeah, I mean the amount of time the amount of space you need for 3D printing, which is basically our entire old garage there at the townhouse, tells me that the orders are doing well. And Kait, obviously, people who know our shows know about Uncanny Film that you've worked on, but please take a moment and let people know where they can find it and explain what Uncanny is.
Uncanny is my film about Rogue and Gambit. It takes place after the Rogue 1995 series. Real excited about that. It just got into Geek Fest and we're starting to hit festivals with it, which is awesome. But you can find it at Uncanny Film on Instagram, and you can find it on YouTube, Uncanny and X Universe Fan Film.
And we appreciate that. And I'm sure Kait will be part of our excitement as we delve into the Guardians Volume 3, and we finally have a release date for Secret Invasion in June. So it's been there's been like Ant-Man was the drop in the bucket, but
Gotta get the
I
band
think
back together.
I know. I think we'll definitely get the band back together. And Katie, you can usually find talking about Star Trek Picard with me, and hopefully she and her fiance are able to join us before the end of the season. But if people are looking for you elsewhere, where can they find you, Katie?
You can find me on all the social medias, mostly at El Sassy Pants. If you're looking on TikTok, it's El Sassy Pants with a Z at the end. You can also check me out on Characters Welcome. I just did a really dumb bit on there, presented by Just for Laughs. So check out the YouTube page, Characters Welcome, and you will see a live show of me in a balaclava.
Well, way to sell it. I did a really dumb bit. Honestly, I'm more interested. I'm way more interested than if you said, I did a really funny bit. You know, I'm like, no, how stupid is it?
It's a modern day Ghost Hunter named
and Dominicus Saxon with a great point. This was a great episode. I still think Richard is an NPC though. So
I am.
We haven't been able
That's
to prove
all I
it.
do is
You're
play
right.
NPCs. So
as always, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. Please subscribe to the Bladtcast YouTube channel, BLADTCAST, or subscribe to the audio version. Just Bladtcast wherever you find your podcasts, except Spotify because I'm lazy. BLADTCAST, but yeah, I should. I'm taking no stand other than just being lazy and not adding it to the RSS feed. But you know, it's early in the year. Maybe I'll get it. Maybe this Spotify thing will catch on at some point. In any case, that is all the time we have for now. When we next Bladtcast, there will be no shortage of movies to talk about. I mentioned I'm seeing Super Mario Brothers tomorrow. Has anybody seen it yet, by the way, here? Any of the three of you? Okay.
No, I'm seeing it next week.
Okay.
I haven't seen it yet,
that is.
I'm glad you. I totally misunderstood you earlier. I thought you were saying you were seeing the John Leguizamo one with your kid. I was like, you're letting your kid go for his birthday to that one?
No. It's a friend's birthday, and
Gotcha.
and he wanted the John Leguizamo one. Yeah, he wanted the John Leguizamo Super Mario Brothers and the 1990 Captain America.
Okay.
Which what kid doesn't really want that? And I saw Air yesterday about the Air Jordans, which I thought was a fun film. And Zach Braff's movie, A Good Person, is fantastic, but a huge bummer. I mean, you'll feel okay after it, but
Is it like on the same level as The Whale? Like how I felt after The Whale?
No, because at the end you'll probably feel okay. I don't want to give too much away, but you'll feel like the world isn't terrible. There's moments along the way. And then I also really enjoyed a movie called Spinning Gold about Neil Bogart, who started Casablanca Records, which the lead in that movie, Jeremy Jordan, I'd never seen him in anything, and he was fantastic. So it's almost like you don't have to have interest in that story. So lots of good movies out now, more to come. And, like I said, summer movie season started at the end of March. That's a great way to do it. So we'll talk more movies next week, and then who knows after that. But that's all the time we have for now. And we will see you next time on the Bladtcast.